Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, General Martin E. Dempsey. General Dempsey is a retired United States Army general with 41 years of military service and 42 months in combat. He served as the chairman of Joint Chief of Staff, the senior officer in the Armed Forces, and military advisor to the Secretary of Defense and to the President. He is a graduate of the United States Military Academy, class of 1974, and also, sir, a distinguished graduate from the class of 2017, and holds a master's degree from Duke University, the Army Command and General Staff College, and from the National War College. He also has an honorary doctorate degree from law from Notre Dame University. General Dempsey's many awards and decorations include the Bronze Star with Valor Device, the Distinguished Service Medal, and Distinguished Service Medals from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage General Dempsey.
Well, you might, there's a band over there. Thanks very much, please. You know, you ever see the movie Apocalypse Now, and Robert Duvall says, there's nothing like the smell of napalm in the morning? My memory is, there's nothing like the sound of 1,000 chairs scraping across the floor in the mess hall. So I appreciate you bringing that memory back. Let me begin by thanking the command, the team here at West Point, the soup, the comm, the dean, Todd, AOG. Congratulations to the committee for especially that, what I found to be a rather remarkable and moving ring ceremony. I don't know that I've ever seen that up close and personal like you just allowed me to see it. Really, really quite something. And, you know, and truthfully, if I had any sense at all, I would simply tell you to reflect on the fact that you are part of the long gray line, and you're gripping hands with all of those who came before. And as you matriculate out into the Army, as it was described, the finest force the world has ever known, there'll be others gripping hands with you. And if I had any sense, I would just say that and remind you that you still have 500 days to go. It's actually a lot of days if you count them up. But I'm not that clever that I would stop. Let me, because my wife Deanie's joining me here. She experienced West Point right along with me pretty much. And I say that because I know that under normal circumstances, whatever that is, you would have family members or significant others, and this would be a great celebration not only of you as classmates, but also of those closest to your heart. And they can't be here this year because of this pandemic. And I know that many, I hope, are Zooming in, and I want to thank them because they have done two things importantly. They have obviously inspired you by their example to lead a life that is uncommon and that is based on service. And secondly, in a very practical way, they are sharing you with us, that is to say, those who either have or will lead the military. And I want to thank you both for your example and also for sharing your sons and daughters with us. Let's give them a round of applause. So let me just start my prepared remarks, but they won't last long, so better pay attention. I want to welcome you to the celebration of your class, of our traditions, and make no mistake about it, our traditions and rituals in our military are very important, and of taking that one step closer to becoming commissioned officers in our Army. I know that you've probably heard the joke about the speakers at events like this. There's a joke that goes around that the speaker at a 500th night dinner, in this case, is kind of like the corpse at an Irish wake. It's important that they be there, but you shouldn't really expect too much out of them. So I hope I can at least exceed that low expectation for you. Let me tell you what impresses me most about you as a group, and I'm sure if I got to know you as individuals, that impression would be validated. You were born, most of you, although I know that the second oldest cadet in the class is 25. I don't know how old the oldest one is, but what I do know is that most of you were born sometime around the year 2000. And when I think of what you have experienced in your young lives and what our country has gone through in those 20 years, it's absolutely remarkable to me. And it's remarkable because we're still standing strong. And by the way, let me just tell you the four things that strike me as most important over those 20 years in terms of national level experiences. Obviously, it started in 2001 with the attack on the World Trade Center and on the Pentagon and in the field in Pennsylvania. And first time that our country had that the United States sovereign territory had been invaded and attacked since 1941. You lived during that time. The second thing, of course, is we are still involved in the longest war in our history. So here you are as West Point cadets aspiring to commission to be leaders in an organization that defends the country from its enemies. And we're in the middle of the longest war in history. And likely it will last a bit longer. And also likely there will be other challenges that we're going to ask you to address. The third thing is we're in the middle right now of the worst pandemic in our history. I mean, arguably on a per capita basis, the 1918 Spanish flu was probably more severe, but this one feels pretty severe, actually. I mean, look around. I mean, the fact that your loved ones are not here with you and you're all staring at me with face masks, and that much of what we do now is done over Zoom and we can't have the kind of human interactions that we're used to, it's had an effect. We're going to work through it, but it has had an effect. And then the last thing is we all on January 6th saw something that I don't think anyone would ever in their wildest imagination had predicted that we would see. And that is our own fellow citizens attacking the capital of our country to try to disrupt the democratic process. So you all have actually seen a lot and have agreed to serve in a country that is going to have to recover from all of that. Because make no mistake about it, our national psyche is still kind of reeling, even though it's 20 years ago, from the attack on the World Trade Center. The pandemic is absolutely going to be part of our lives for some period of time, and the effects of it in our financial well-being and in the way we interact with each other is going to be felt for a very long time. The insurrection is yet to actually write its story on the imprint, its impression on our national psyche in the years to come. And in all of that, you have done what you've done, which is to say, I'll serve, I'll help the country figure all this out. Send me. I can do this. I'm confident enough. I'm educated enough. I'm fit enough. And I'm eager to do something more than just serve my own personal purposes. So good for you. And I want to thank you I just want to start by thanking you for being here. It's been a remarkable year, but you're a remarkable group of young men and women. You are growing and every day in your 47-month experience here at West Point. You'll continue to grow. I want to say that as I sat here in my own cow year, many moons ago, as we say, I wondered, what does 500th night really mean? I mean, I know that every class wants to celebrate something. Plebe Parent Weekend was kind of a liberating moment. Yearling Winter Weekend was, I don't know. I'm not sure why we did Yearling Winter Weekend. I mean, I guess because it was cold and we wanted to do something. 500th night comes along, next year it's 100th night. But let me tell you something, this one really does mean something. This one really does mean something. And in case you missed what it means in the middle of our pandemic, let me just refresh your memory about what it really does mean. As cows, you've made a commitment to transition from knowing about our profession to owning our profession, to being our profession, from simply participating in it to actually taking ownership of it. You, unless you opt out in some unsavory way, you are going to be commissioned in 500 or so nights, and you are going to lead America's sons and daughters and do whatever the country asks you to do with those young men and women. So this one really is different. You have transitioned. You actually made the transition when you took that oath and stepped foot into that first class in your cow year. But this night is a celebration of the fact that you are absolutely on a path, unmistakably, to be leaders in our Army. Now, there's two aspects. I said that you own the profession. There's actually two ways you can own our profession. One is you own it in accomplishing the operational tasks that are given to our Army. That is to say, you go on mission. Now, you don't own the Army in that way yet, but 500 nights, I joked about it a moment ago, may seem like a lot of nights, but it'll go by quicker than you think. You will be leading soldiers sooner than you think. But for now, you're not leading soldiers in operational missions. But the other way we all own our profession is by being stewards of the profession. You absolutely have a role and a part to play in defining our profession in every possible way, what it is, what it stands for, what it means, how people think about it. You do have that responsibility even now. And I hope that you recognize that responsibility. Remember a moment ago when I described the great crises that have kind of converged over the last 20 years, but especially over the last couple of years? I want to suggest to you that in a way that I don't think we talk about often enough, those kind of crises generate certain emotions. I mean, we've seen it. Anger is certainly one of those emotions. Uncertainty is certainly one of those emotions. It can lead to pessimism, being unsettled, being unsure. And I think as a country, we'd have to say we are a little more pessimistic. We are a little more unsettled. We are a little more angry. But the one emotion that I think we don't talk about enough, I guess because we're afraid to admit it, is all of those crises that bear down on us generate fear. That's really the emotion that is generated most prominently in these crises, is fear. Fear for our health, fear for our safety, fear for our financial well-being. You don't have to worry about graduating and not having a job, but I can tell you that even at Duke University, where I teach some of the best and brightest minds in the country, there's a great deal of fear about whether they will be able to find the kind of jobs that they thought they could find before the pandemic and the economic impacts were felt. So there's a lot of fear out there. Now, here's the thing about fear. There's only one antidote to fear, only one, and that's a sense of belonging. The only way we get through the things in our life that cause us to fear is if we feel like we belong, that we have others experiencing the same thing, that we have a team around us that can help, a family around us, whatever it is. A sense of belonging is the only way you can navigate your way through fear. And here's what I'd like you to remember about tonight and my challenge to you as you complete your education at West Point, and go out and lead our Army. As a leader, you have no greater responsibility than to build in your organization a sense of belonging. That's it. You must build a sense of belonging in those who are entrusted to your care, or their fears will overcome them and you won't be able to get the jobs done that we're going to ask you to do. Now, I don't think I actually learned that at West Point. No offense, Soup and Com and Dean. I don't think I learned that lesson. In fact, I think I learned that lesson early on in my lieutenant years in what I will describe to you as an unlikely leadership story. And it goes something like this. Second Lieutenant Dempsey was a cavalryman, dashing and handsome. They go together. And I was assigned duties to patrol the Czechoslovakian border with West Germany. Remember now, this is before the fall of the Soviet Union. And so the 2nd Cavalry patrolled the Czech border, and the 11th Cavalry patrolled the East German border, and 5th Corps was behind the 11th Cav, and 7th Corps was behind the 2nd Cav, and we had about 300,000 soldiers in Europe alone. And the way that mission would be accomplished would be that platoon leaders, it was a wonderful leadership experience. I was given a small outpost of a camp with a chain link fence around it, no bigger than a football field, a chain link fence around it, Quonset huts for living and dining, and the operations center, motor pool, makeshift basketball court. There's always a makeshift basketball court. And we would send out patrols pretty much 24/7, usually groups of 2 or 3 Jeeps, not Humvees, the original M151, long before any modifications to it. And we would go out and we would go to pre-designated patrol points, conduct surveillance, because we knew that there were certain points along the border where the Soviets on the other side would gather and train, and if they were going to attack, that's probably where they would stage. And so we did that. Now, mind you, in those days, there was no Waze or Google Earth. This was all about maps and terrain and knowing where the border was, because it wasn't all fenced. Sometimes it was just a small little border stone. So it was high anxiety for a young lieutenant, because the quickest way I can think of to have ended my career would have been to have a patrol cross the border, be captured by a Soviet patrol, and then have the rare privilege of being given back with all of the media attention that would have generated. So it was a really high anxiety. And one day, and so if I wasn't on patrol myself, I was in the ops center monitoring the radio traffic, and with push pins and a map and a paper map, tracking the progress of patrols and making sure that they didn't get too close to the border and they were going where we were told to go. Now, the other thing about the Army in 1974, 75, really the post-Vietnam Army, first of all, it was still a conscript army. It was draftees. They were great. I mean, they were wonderful men and not so many women in those days, but they were a good group. But they were draftees, and so you'd have to assume that about half of them really didn't want to be there. And as a result, we had significant racial issues and drug-related issues that today you would find to be fictional. You wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe that we had the kind of drug problems we had and racial problems we had. The soldiers did what you got them to do, but there was an underlying sense of disenfranchisement. And in any platoon of 40 or so, I had 5 or 6 that when I showed up at the unit, the troop commanders told me, "You're not going to be able to turn this group. You watch out for this group. They could even become violent. They're very hard drug users. They fight all the time. So be careful of those 5 or 6 soldiers." I said, "Okay, sir, I got it." So I'm out at the border one day in the op center, and a gate guard comes into the op center and says, "Hey, sir, you need to come out to the gate." I said, "Why? You're the gate guard." He said, "Yes, sir, but there's a nun at the gate." And I said to myself, wow, this drug thing is really bad. Mind you, we're in the middle of the German forest, like 10 kilometers, honest to God, 10 kilometers from anything. It was a forest trail, kind of like a fire break. And he was telling me there's a nun at the gate. I said, how'd she get to the gate? He said, I don't know, sir. There's no vehicle. There's just a nun at the gate. I said, how do you know it's a nun? He said, she looks like a nun. I said, what is that? He said, she's short and fat. And she's got all the stuff on. I'm thinking, oh boy. I said, do this. I said, go, I'm busy. Go back to the gate and tell the nun, thanks for coming. We don't have time for you today. We'll catch you next time. So he goes out. 5 minutes later, he comes back. Hey, sir, the nun said she's not leaving until she talks to you. And I thought to myself, oh my God, it is a nun. That's how they do it. So the patrol I was monitoring was fine at that point. So I said, okay. I came out to the gate, and as I'm walking there, I walked right around the makeshift basketball court. And on the court, playing 3-on-3 basketball, were those 6 soldiers I told you about. The ones that were, that just were kind of rogue, really. I just took note of it. I got to the gate, and sure enough, there's a nun at the gate. And I walked up to her, and in my finest German, I said, good afternoon, sister. What can I do for you? And I said, who are you? She said, I'm Sister Mary, in English, by the way. She said, I'm Sister Mary Cecilia. I'm from Milwaukee. I'm over here on a mission. We have a little convent about 25 kilometers from here. And I'm here to pray with your soldiers. And I thought, oh my gosh. I thought, there's nothing in my platoon leader book about a nun in the middle of a German forest. So then I got to thinking, I just can't throw the gates open and let the nun in. I mean, I didn't know I didn't honestly know whether she was really a nun. I mean, you're a little suspicious at times. So I I lied to a nun. I just want to admit that to you. And I said, sister, we're in the middle of an exercise. I can't let you in now, but if you come back next week, we'll figure something out. So she said, well, that's unfortunate, but she said, okay, I'll come back. I said, can I give you a ride someplace or have somebody where are you going? She said, I'm going back to the convent. I said, how are you getting there? She said, I'll walk. I said, you just told me it's 25 kilometers. By the way, she was probably 60, I'm guessing. And she said, by the way, as soon as I start walking, somebody will pick me up and take me back. Don't worry about me, I'm good. And off she goes. So I thought, okay. So I go back in the op center. I told the intel officer, hey, do me a favor, get a hold of regiment. This is the higher headquarters. Get a hold of regiment and find out if anybody has any reports of a nun in the forest. And the intel officer said, sir, do you really want me to ask that question? Because if you ask that question to regiment, they're going to think you've lost your mind. And they're going to come out here and find somebody else to take the job. I said, you're right. Don't ask that question. I said, just find out if there's any unusual visitors we had like 12 border camps. I said, just pulse the system and find out if there's any strange visitors. So he came back and said, no, nobody's ever seen any strange visitors. And he said, I did try to find out about nuns. There's none of them either. I said, okay. The next Sunday it rained. The following Sunday, I'm in the op center, and you know what's going to happen. The gate guard, sir, there's a nun at the gate. I said, I go out to the gate. She says, I'm here to pray with your soldiers. I said, okay, sister. I said, but before I open this gate, you got to do what I tell you. You got to stick with me. I'll take you where you need to be. You can't make the soldiers pray. We can offer, and you'll find that they will be very respectful to you, but you got to stay with me, right? You're going to do that? She said, of course, Lieutenant, I'll do that. We opened the gate, and she bolted. I mean, I didn't know a 60-year-old in a robe could move that fast. And she bolted right to the basketball court where the 6 soldiers, exactly the 6 soldiers I was most worried about, were playing basketball. And she strolls right into the middle of them. And they're looking at me like, what are you doing? why are you letting this happen? You're the lieutenant. You're in charge. This is not good. And I'm shrugging my shoulders, like, it's a nun. What am I going to do? It's a nun. And she says to them, I'm Sister Mary Cecilia. I'm here to pray with you. I chimed in and said, you don't have to do this, but if you want to pray, this is your huckleberry right here. And I turned around and walked over to the edge of the basketball court, believing that I would turn back around and none of them would take her up on it. And you know what? Every one of them had their hands crossed in front of them and had their heads bowed, and she was praying with them. So then I took her around to different places, but as she was running over, I was yelling to her, sister, don't go there. Don't go over to that group. Now I take her around to other places. It's time for her to go home. I said, sister, can I have somebody drive you back? And she said, yeah, absolutely. So I had a Jeep brought up, and she said, I want you to drive me back. And I said, sister, I don't have a license. And she said, it's a Jeep. How hard could this be? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, first I lied to the nun, and now I'm going to drive without a damn driver's license. By the way, don't do this. I'm telling you, don't do this, because you could get caught. This is the old days. So I hop in the Jeep. It had no top on it, by the way, because we're on patrol. Nun is over here. I'm driving. All of her stuff is flapping in my face. I'm trying to concentrate because I don't have a driver's license. We're chatting. We get back to her convent. There really was a convent. And she gets out and she says, I'll be back soon. I said, oh, I hope so, sister. As she's walking away, she turns suddenly and walks back. And she said, hey, can I ask you a question? I said, sure, sister, absolutely. She said, why didn't you want me to talk to that first group of soldiers? And I said, you know what, sister, they're not my best soldiers. And she said, but they're your soldiers, right? And I said, yes, sister, they're my soldiers. And she said, well, you haven't given up on them, have you? And I thought, again, I'm thinking to myself, I don't remember this conversation at West Point about leadership, but she had hit me right in the heart. Because I had, when I reflected on it, absolutely, I had given up on those souls. I had completely given up on it. And she said, well, just don't give up on your soldiers. I said, okay, sister. So all the way back, I'm driving, and it's haunting me that, that a 60-year-old nun from Milwaukee just schooled me in leadership. I mean, honestly, I'm thinking, how could that happen? And so I get back to the base camp. I drive in. I parked the Jeep. I walked over to the basketball court, took off my blouse of my fatigue uniform in those days, and asked them if I could get in the game. Now, I would like to tell you that I saved all 6. I didn't. Among that group, there were some truly hardened criminals, but I saved 2. And 20 years later, I was giving up command of the 3rd Armored Cavalry at Fort Carson, Colorado. And we had a receiving line at the end of the ceremony. And I'm shaking hands and, thanking people for coming and so forth. And this big, tall, skinny guy comes right in front of me. I see his name is Vincent. And he says, hey, sir, you remember me? And I said, I do. You were in my platoon back in Germany in 1975. He was one of the 6. Now he was a master sergeant. He said, I just want to thank you for taking a chance on me. I thought, you know what? That's a pretty good lesson. So here's what I want to tell you about, this is not my water, so I'm not drinking it because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Thanks. Here's what I want to tell you. Here's what I want to tell you about leadership. Just make sure that the people entrusted to your care feel like they belong. They're not always going to live up to your expectations. I mean, they're just not. But make sure they always understand that you as their leader are committed to them. And by the way, if you do that, you got a better than even chance that they'll return the favor and let you know that they're committed to you. Because there's too much fear in the world right now. There's just too much. And again, the only way to overcome it is by being part of an effort to develop a sense of belonging so we can knock that fear back where it belongs. Okay, now the last thing I want to do before I leave is, I'm not leaving, I'm going back to that table actually, but I have a bit of a reputation for singing. And so here's what I want to do tonight. I belong to, I'm on the board of a group of a nonprofit called TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And what they do is they, once the Army, they take care of the families of the fallen. And the Army does a great job, by the way, of taking care of families and soldiers from kind of cradle to grave. But if we have a fallen soldier, once the internment is over, oftentimes the families can disappear because they go back to places where we don't have any coverage. And TAPS is an organization that takes care of them. It finds them, it networks with them, it embraces them. And every year I go to this camp. It's called the Good Grief Camp, and there's about 600 kids. I mean, it rips your heart out, but it's inspirational. And I always perform a couple of current songs with the Army Chorus in Washington, D.C. I've been doing it now for about 10 years. And we always get ready by figuring out what songs, are most popular at the time that the kids might recognize. And then I usually rewrite them. And then the chorus gets them ready and we practice and then we do it. So we were getting ready to do this for the May Good Grief Camp and they canceled the camp because of COVID-19. But I had the band in hand already, and I said, you know what? We like to use music, and military music in particular, to inspire and to provide hope and to entertain, of course, but also to inspire and provide hope. I said, what about if we reached a little higher? I mean, we try to do it for the military. Why don't we try to do something that the whole country can, maybe think about? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, let's do a song and I'll try to get it on, one of the major networks and maybe it'll help people get through this pandemic. So, because you could feel people just getting weighed down by the thing. So I picked a song by a guy named Doogie McLean, a Scotsman, called Caledonia. And he sang about, he was expatriated, he was traveling, and he just had a moment of nostalgia about his own country. And he wrote a song called Caledonia. So I rewrote the words with the help of the chorus, and we performed it. And then using the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff convening authority, we got it into the hands of David Muir, and he played it on ABC World News Tonight back in May. Now, the reason we're going to do that song right now, there's a particular line in there that I want you to listen to and, engage with it in your own personal experience. In other words, any decent song has a line or two in it that causes you to think about what it means to you. It might mean something to everybody, but there's probably points in there, if it's a really good song or a good poem or a good book, there's points in it where you relate to it. The line in this song that is that line, at least the line we intended it to be, is it says, and if this crisis changes us, you know that it would make me more than sad. And what we were getting at then was, if we let this pandemic change the way we live our lives and we relate to each other, that's just going to, we can fight through this, but if it changes us, that's going to be really sad. Now, since May, we've gone through even greater turmoil, even greater hardship, even greater fear. And now, when I think about that line, I worry we can't let these crises, this convergence of crises, we can't let them change us. And you as you go out and serve in our Army, are going to be someone who people rely on to represent that which is our fabric as a country. I mean, look, our motto is your motto. Our motto is duty, honor, and country. You're going to go out and represent that to the American people and to each other. Don't let that change. See what you think of the song. Here we go. If I can get a mic. Okay, I see help has arrived. Good. How are you? Testing. Okay. How do I pick this up? Thanks. Can you hear me, Xavier? All right. I've heard you got a voice. Let's see. All right, here we go. I don't know if you can see the changes that have come over me in these past few months. I've been afraid that we might drift away.
So I've been telling old stories and singing songs that made me think about where I came from. It's the reason why I know we're gonna be okay.
Oh, let me tell you that I love you, and I think about you all the time. America, you're calling us, still our home, sweet home. And if we let this crisis change us, you know that it would make me more than sad. America, you're everything I've ever had.
Things have changed and they keep on changing. Freedom's lost and our fears are raging. Those who serve keep our hope of faith. Their courage lights our way. Try and keep on trying. Times are tough, yes, there's no denying. We'll travel on, our banners flying, steady in the wind.
Oh, let me tell you that I love you, that I think about you all the time. America, you're calling us, still our home, sweet home. And if we let this crisis change us, you know that it would make me more than sad. America, you're everything I've ever had. Now I'm sitting here before the fire, an empty room, a forest choir. The flames will ebb, won't grow much higher. They'll wither till they're gone. And I'm steady thinking our way is clear, and we know what we will do tomorrow. We may be shaken, but we won't be bowed, and we will persevere. Oh, and let me tell you that I love you, and I think about you all the time. America, you're calling us, still our home, sweet home. And if we let these crises change us, you know that it would make me more than sad. America, you're everything I've ever had. Good luck, class of 2022.
give you a round of applause.
General Dempsey, on behalf of the class of 2022, I'd like to present you this cadet bus as a token of our appreciation, sir. Thank you so much for doing that throw day. Thank you so much, sir. Are you going to grab a quick picture right here, sir? Can we grab that for you? Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.